Hey everybody, I wanted to go ahead and go over your syllabus. So the syllabus is posted, naturally you can download it. I just kind of wanted to go over it line by line the same way I would physically in class. Hopefully clarify some of these things, add a little nuance to the syllabus, and make sure everybody's as clear as possible in the syllabus moving forward. Now, if you're still unclear on elements of the syllabus, naturally feel free to contact me, which brings me to the first element in the syllabus. So here's class, our class, Multiculturalism, Diversity and Education, SOCL 501. Professor is me, Dr. Drew Baird. We are meeting online asynchronously. The asynchronous part is important, meaning you are not going to be required to be here for quote-unquote class time. Now, if you want to do a Google Meet and meet with me synchronously, naturally you can. But all of our course content is going to be done asynchronously. Every module will start on Monday. Will end on Sunday. Most things are due on Sunday, with Thursdays being when initial discussion postings are due. But other than that, Sundays is when almost everything else is due. And so you can self-pace. You can do that on your own time, at your own schedule. So you won't have to worry about being at a certain place or being at your computer at a certain time in order to engage in this class. Now, my phone number is right here. This goes to my phone. That's actually my Google Voice number, but it's forwarded to my phone. Feel free to hit it up. If you have a quick question, you can call me or you can shoot me a text if there's something fast. If there's something you want to sit down and actually discuss in a little bit more detail, we can set up a Google Meet session, and that's fine. So required material, I mean, most of you probably got the email from last week of me asking what the status was with everybody in terms of purchasing the books. I moved the books to optional materials. All of the required materials for this class will be posted online. They're all materials that you would have access to through CNU libraries or some other free source. But I'll just go ahead and post them all on Scholar just so they're all in one place. If you did get the books and you can't return them, there are going to be instances in which you can use those, and they will be helpful, especially Multicultural Education by Noel in doing the final term project. But you by no means are required to have them. And if you do have them and you have the ability to return them and you want to get your money back, please do. I apologize for the kind of last minute change there. I was a kind of last minute fill-in for the summer class. So by the time I got this class, the books were already ordered. It's generally my preference to do things with free material where it is possible. So the course catalog description and my description differ. They're just articulated differently, but I mean they are more or less the same. They differ in their wording. Generally, this class explores the impact of social dimensions of difference on educational outcomes and experiences. And that includes, but isn't limited to, things like race, gender, social class. There are a whole world of dimensions of difference that impact education, things that define people and determine the way that society treats people, that ends up impacting somebody's educational experience and their educational outcome. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the ability to address all of the dimensions of difference that impact education. That's just impossible, especially in a 4-week term. But we will talk about some of the more prominent ones and how they impact people's education, especially race, gender. At the end of the semester, it's my intention to actually have a module specifically talking about discourse and the way that we talk about dimensions of difference in education. and the way that we let that discourse shape our policy that ends up dictating the way that education is constructed. So in the syllabus, there's a lot of boilerplate stuff here: MAT learning outcomes, MAT program goals, MAT expectations of students. You should all be familiar with that as MAT students. So course policies, professor contact. Obviously, your first point of contact for me, for especially like non-pressing things, should be my email address. Email me. If there's something you want done a little bit quicker, you can hit me up on the phone number. But generally, your first point of contact should be my email. Now, there's one thing I always have to say, is do not email me assignments. Everything for this entire class will be submitted on Scholar. If you email me an assignment, it's a very good chance I'm going to lose track of it very, very quickly. Especially in this time of COVID where all of our university business is online. My email inbox is swamped constantly. It's really difficult for me to keep track of assignments, so please don't email me assignments there. But for anything else, your first point of contact for me should generally be my email address. Academic integrity, don't cheat. Y'all have made it pretty far already in higher education. I would imagine most of you are pretty honest students. It's probably going to be very difficult to plagiarize in this class. Because it's a very focused class. But yes, do not do that. The academic integrity violations will be handled according to the protocol set forth by the university. Disability and accommodation. Naturally, if it is the case that you have any sort of accommodation from the Student Accessibility Office, please do get me that documentation as soon as possible. And if you need to explain some of that documentation to me, I mean, feel free to. I know that some of the documentation can be kind of vague in terms of expectations. So if you have some sort of accommodation that you feel like needs some like qualification or explaining, feel free to come to me and, you know, give me a little bit more of an idea of how to specifically integrate your accommodation into your learning experience for the semester. Success. Not gonna lie, this has been in my syllabus since I first started teaching at CNU. I never articulated a decent explanation of what it just. Let's succeed. Let's succeed. You have all sorts of excellent resources and academic support to help you succeed, including the Office of Student Engagement and Counseling Services, a writing center. Now, that said, I don't know what of that is available to you right now. So take all that with a grain of salt. But I can always ask around if you want to know what's available to you. But whatever resources you have still available to you, at least, you know, digitally, I definitely encourage you to take advantage of it. I tend to find that college students take advantage of only a small fraction of the great resources that they typically have. Conduct. Be respectful. Don't be disruptive or rude. Now this class will involve a fair bit of like discourse. It's a grad class. We're going to be conversing online and discussion boards every week. Be respectful. You guys are, you know, grad students and MAT students. I really don't anticipate this being an issue. Announcements and outside materials. Now I will, with due warning or due notice, give you outside materials that aren't necessarily on the syllabus yet. I mean, there's a lot of outside materials that are already listed on the syllabus. But since this is actually the first time I've taught this class, I'm probably going to adjust some things as I go along. And so I'll make announcements, give you plenty of time, heads up, in order to I apologize. My dog is having a coughing fit. You okay, Deacon? Sorry. Deacon's fine. I will make announcements fairly frequently. I have a tendency to use the announcements feature on Scholar almost like I I don't want to say I engage it like a Twitter feed, but I engage it a lot. And so, yeah, keep a heads up for announcements. I generally will, I guess, generally if there's something I'm thinking about announcing to the class, I always err on the side of go ahead and send a message rather than don't, just because, I mean, it is a goal of mine to be as transparent and clear as possible. And so generally you will get a lot of communication from me, a lot of that being from the announcements in Scholar. The makeup policy. Naturally, if you miss something due to an extenuating circumstance, give me that documentation within 48 hours of the original assessment date. Late submission policy. Now, actually, this is the exact same late submission policy that I have in my undergraduate classes. I considered getting rid of it for this since it's a grad class, but it's also the time of COVID and things are unpredictable for people. So submitting things late, basically anything, is a 10% deduction per data that it's late, up to 3 days late, at which point the assignment closes. So that applies to most things. I think the only thing it might not apply to, and I'll let you know for sure at the end of the term, is the final term paper. And the reason for that is I think the due date on the final term paper rubs very, very, very close to when grades are actually due for me to submit. So I'll let you know on that. I mean, if it is the case that it's going to be pragmatically possible to still have the late policy apply to the final term paper, then I will. Course format criteria. Modules. So everything in this class is going to be broken up into 4 different modules. Those are all pretty much self-contained. Given that it is the case that almost nobody in this class has taken online classes before, and you may be taking other CNU classes where it's being taught by people who haven't taught online classes before. My goal this term is to provide you as much predictability as possible. Each module will be self-contained, will have the same patterns, the same basic stuff. Everything will be due on Sunday with the exception of initial discussion board postings, which will be due on Thursday. I want you to be able to get into a rhythm relatively quickly with this class, and I want you to know what to expect. I don't want to throw you a lot of curveballs because online education is something that is new to you, I'm sure. So I want this to be very, very predictable, and there will be established rhythms, and part of that rhythm is the fact that this class is going to be broken down into weekly, relatively self-contained modules. Discussion boards. Once a week we will have a discussion. First one's already posted in Module 1. Now this is actually where it's kind of interesting. Now you can respond to the prompt with an initial response that is either 250 words for an initial response to respond to a prompt, and then a subsequent 2 100-word response postings. That constitutes your contribution to the discussion board. I hope that everybody really, really critically considers the prompt and responds to everybody's or responds to 2 of their classmates really, really thoughtfully. Now you can do that either with 250-word initial posting and 2 100-word follow-up postings, or you can do videos. I actually already have in course resources on Scholar a little how-to on how to record a video on your phone in YouTube and have it automatically be uploaded. And that being the case, if you can do that, then you can just post the link to your video. In which case, that initial response should be a minimum of 5 minutes, with follow-up responses to your classmates being 2.5 minutes in length. So, I mean, I would encourage everybody to do that. The reason why I would like to encourage people to do it is because this was initially supposed to be an in-person class, and this is also a CNU class. And so, I really want this to be as personable as possible. And I want you to get to know each other and have a legitimate discourse. that has as much of the same kind of nuance that we would say, or that we could see in the as much nuance as possible. Maybe not a classroom level of nuance, but certainly I would like to try and have the discussions be as close to the classroom experience as possible. Now, I hope you can do that. I'm not requiring it though, because I know that technology, resources, and abilities are different for different people. So you can do a video, you can do a posting, it's up to you. Either way, I mean, those are acceptable. So each module also has a module synthesis essay. That's a minimum of 500 words or about 2 pages, in which you synthesize some of the main ideas from the readings you'll have. Well, I say readings, not all of them are readings. Some of it's going to be media. There's a brief documentary. I think there's a podcast. You'll be responding to a prompt. The nature of that prompt and the synthesis essay is going to change from module to module because the subject matter changes from module to module. So lastly, every module will have an introspective activity. These are brief activities that are intended to get you to think about your own future teaching, how you are going to integrate some of the concepts you'll be learning in this class into your teaching. Some of them involve like little online activities that go with them. They should be relatively brief, but each one ideally gives you the ability to introspectively think about yourself. Now, the term will culminate with a couple things. The last 2 modules will have an annotated bibliography, which is part of a final term paper, which is the Dimension of Diversity term paper. What I want you to do is think about dimensions of diversity that are relevant to you. Now, a dimension of diversity is just any characteristic of an individual that influences the way that they are perceived or treated by society. That can be somebody's race, somebody's gender, somebody's social class, somebody's religion, somebody's occupation, somebody's region, somebody's accent, somebody's body type. That can be a whole variety of things. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to choose 3 that apply to you, and I want you to research how those dimensions of difference generally impact people, or at least what has been the research done on it, what has been written on it. And so, like, let's say if it is the case that you are Hispanic American, and you want to include that in your paper, then you can, bring up research and include research about, the Hispanic American experience in education, and how being an Hispanic American perhaps influences educational experiences and outcomes. And then, perhaps compare and contrast what is written about that dimension of diversity with what your personal experience has been. So you can kind of establish if, you're a bit of an outlier, if you're kind of like, where the norm is. So you'll choose 3. So for instance, I have an example here. For instance, if I were to write my paper on generation, gender, and region, I would be writing a paper synthesizing the research on how being a first-wave millennial male and growing up in the American South each tended to impact my educational outcomes. And all of those are things that define me personally, and they all have impacted my educational outcomes in one way or another. And for each one, being a first-wave millennial born in the 80s, being a male, and growing up in the American South, there's plenty of research out there for each one of those that describes how those specific features of me has tended to impact educational outcomes. So this is going to end up being about a 2,500 word essay, I think 10-ish pages. For each dimension of diversity, include 3 scholarly research sources. If you have the Noel book, each separate chapter is considered a valid research source. So that could be really useful. Conclude your paper by discussing how you personally are an outlier or the norm in your educational outcomes. are concerning the educational outcomes you experience, I'll tell you right now, there's some grammatical errors in the syllabus still, and I will fix them before I get it to you. Use APA, ASA, or Chicago-style citation conventions. Here is an example of dimensions of diversity, but dimensions of diversity are practically limitless. Now, you probably don't want to choose one that's too obscure or too unique because you want something that has research on it. But you can do, age, gender, race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, generation. I have age on here twice. But all of those things would have a good amount of research out there on them. The annotated bibliography is just the module before you submit. You're going to submit a brief proposal telling you what dimensions of diversity you're writing about and what your resources are, and write a little bit, just a blurb under each resource that you give me, describing what is in it and how you intend to use it. So I will say, in terms of the class overall, the class, I mean, realistically, as you can tell, is a little bit writing heavy. If now not including the final essay, each module, if you don't do discussion videos, each module comes out to about 5 pages double spaced. If you do the discussion modules with videos, or sorry, if you do the discussion boards with videos, each module ends up being about 850 words of minimum written responses for about 3.5 pages double spaced. So that's actually fairly brief. Yeah, so I mean, doing the videos will save you a good amount of writing. I will say, actually, before I move on from these points of assessment, that I have rubrics on Scholar under course resources for the module synthesis essays, and the dimension of diversity paper, and for the annotated bibliography. So you should you'll know what criteria I'm grading by for all of those things. So here's the grade composition, the points, and how they're distributed. And this is our course schedule. Module 1, by the time you see this video, Module 1 will already be posted. Now, I can tell you that Module 2 probably won't change all that much. Module 1 actually has the most reading. It's probably the most reading you'll do in the semester, or in the term, is going to be in Module 1. The assessment shouldn't change, but I may change the reading. Actually, I can almost guarantee you I'm going to add more to Week 4 module. I kind of wanted to see what the vibe of the class was and how things were playing out before I actually went ahead and finished off the reading for that module. So actually, this will have a little bit more than what is posted right here. So anyways, that is the syllabus. Let me know if you have any questions. Best of luck. Really looking forward to working with all of you guys throughout the course of this June term.